Good morning, and welcome to The Brief. I'm Bear, founder and CEO of RefugeMedical.com. Let's feed these uninformed voters while we talk about the news of the day. All right, well, for starters, the White House has admitted that there are U.S. troops in Ukraine serving in an advisory role, of course. You know, technical advisors, given all the weapon systems that we've handed out like candy on Halloween to the Ukrainians. I was talking with a guy whose job it is to know recently, and said, hey, what do you think about the Ukraine war? And he said, honestly, I think it's the bad guys versus the bad guys. I can't say I necessarily disagree with that statement, but it's interesting, an advisory role. Remember that the United States involvement in Vietnam began in an advisory capacity, right? You had SEAL Team 2 up in there advising, advising from their ribs, rigid inflatable boats with machine guns laid across the bow, right? And there's also this thing called TAA, Train, Advise, Assist. That's advising. How exactly are they advising and assisting? Interesting, right? Why does this matter? It matters because it could potentially, very likely will, heighten the divide between the U.S. and Russia. It could potentially heighten the divide between the U.S. and Russia. So that's a big boy indicator for us. Not that I think that we're necessarily in a position where we have to be overly concerned about warheads on foreheads as Americans currently, but as we begin, we being the big we, United States of America, begins the process of admitting that, yeah, we not only are supplying equipment and materiel, we're supplying manpower to this conflict in Ukraine. That's direct NATO involvement. That's the thing that Russia has had an issue with from jump. So it's something to be aware of. Large-scale macro conflict definitely has the potential to have a negative impact on us here as Americans. What is this? This is the Sour Apple Sniper. JP Donnell. Jocko Go. Really been enjoying Origin Main and Jocko Fuel here lately. Hopefully in the near future we'll have some exciting things to announce regarding that. Hey, if you're new here and you want to get some unadulterated data on what's going on in the world and in the country, please consider subscribing. And if I didn't earn your subscription in this video, catch up with us on the next one. Bear Independent Brief 2, November 22. It's not surprising, but it's worth noting. A bulletin to law enforcement from the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, together with the National Counterterrorism Center and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, has been obtained by journalists. The best words, tremendous, believe it. Everybody tells me Melania's beautiful. It warned of a potential spike in domestic violent extremism around the midterm elections. which are coming, by the way, reading, quote, "We assess that election-related perceptions of fraud and DVE, domestic violent extremist reactions to divisive topics, will likely drive sporadic DVE plotting of violence and broader efforts to justify violence in the lead up to and following the 2022 midterm election cycle," end quote. Warnings about attacks against politicians and election officials were issued the same day Paul Pelosi was attacked in his home. Now, the Paul Pelosi thing is interesting because it was originally pawned off on us schlubs, the peasants of the United States of America, as being a violent home invasion. Turns out, it appears that Paul Pelosi is homo AF, and that guy was his boyfriend, and they were there at 2 o'clock in the morning. And a lot of the neighbors have said that the narrative that is being spewed by the media does not at all fit the lifestyle that the Pelosi's lead, nor does it fit any of the facts on the ground. Who'd have thought? Who'd have thought? So Nancy Pelosi, this devout Catholic that's totally okay with murdering the unborn in the womb and grifting and robbing and stealing and cheating, and who's basically drunk all the time. Turns out her husband was apparently involved in a love affair with this guy who something went sideways at some point, and said guy attempted to beat Paul Pelosi potentially to death with a hammer. Sounds like a crime of passion to me, but I'm not a detective. Hold on, we gotta move the hose. Now also, this concept of domestic violent extremism, DVEs, people behaving badly, civil unrest. Yeah, it's a civil unrest indicator. But let's not miss the fact that these federal agents in the hallowed halls of Washington, D.C. are doing their best to paint people who are pissed off at the system as domestic violent extremism. I'm not calling for violence, just to be clear here. However, I'm not going to be surprised if there is violence, because the same people who are about to be voted out of office these are the same people, right, that said that you couldn't go to church because of COVID. You lost your job because of supply chain issues due to COVID, or because you wouldn't do those two things and that other thing because of COVID. How many people were dishonorably discharged because they wouldn't do those things, right? Small businesses shut down, large businesses shut down. You couldn't go to the park because outdoor transmission of this deadly, deadly virus, right? It turns out that only 6% of the total deaths that were counted as COVID deaths, 6% were actually from COVID. And of that 6%, the vast majority, I think it's 94% of that 6%, had 3 or more comorbidities, and the average age of somebody who died from COVID was 70 years old. So these same people that shut down the entire country for a couple of years and told you that you were the crazy person because you wouldn't wear a face diaper, because you wanted to go worship however you saw fit, you wanted to run your business however you saw fit, you wanted to go earn to feed your family however you saw fit, freedom of movement however you saw fit. These same people that told you that you were the bad guy are now concerned that you might behave badly during the midterm elections because you've had it up to here with their horse shit. Now again, I'm not advocating for violence, but I wouldn't be surprised if there is some. And I'll be honest, I'm not a political person. You guys know me. I think that the red NASCAR team and the blue NASCAR team both suck, and it's the same game. They're still driving the car around the track while they're charging you to be in attendance to watch them drive the car around the track, right? And selling you hot dogs and popcorn and cheap beer and everything else, right? Bread and circuses. But this may be, if I put any hope in elections, this may be potentially the last off-ramp before potential disaster here in the United States of America. And that sucks, because while my identity is first and foremost as a son of the Most High, I am blessed to have been born into this great country that is the United States of America, and I don't want to see it fail. I also don't have much hope for elections, given the 2020 presidential election. By the way, did anybody see the election in Brazil? Jair Bolsonaro lost, hasn't said a word in a few days, and the incumbent now, dude who was president, I think, from 2003 to 2011, served 2 terms, and then was rolled up on charges for, not indecency. Anyway, he was rolled up on charges, right? So that guy got reelected. And what did Biden do? He tweeted, congratulations to incumbent guy and to Brazil for having free and fair and open and honest elections. Bro, you a little sensitive about free and fair and open and honest elections after 81 million people voted for you in the last one? I'm just saying, your fig leaf's showing. All right. Water's done. Back to the report. Ideologically driven lone actors are the most likely threat. But it's not just politically involved officials that should be concerned. The aforementioned advisory also stated, quote, "We assess some domestic violent extremists motivated by election-related grievances would likely view election-related infrastructure, personnel, and voters involved in the election process as attractive targets, including at publicly accessible locations like polling places, ballot drop box locations, voter registration sites, campaign events, and political party offices," end quote. So they're concerned that these domestic violent extremists aren't just going to target the politicians, but they're going to target the polling sites, voter registration, and you, the voter, so that you will stay home and not vote, so that hopefully for them, this red wave thing never comes to fruition and they can maintain the stranglehold that they have on the American populace. How interesting. Don't believe the hype. That's what I would say. Don't believe the hype. You do you, boo. If you want to go vote, go vote. See, fear is a excellent tool for controlling the populace, right? Have we not learned anything from COVID over the last 2-3 years? Fear creates groupthink, right? And that's what they want. They want you and us to be this. This is what they want. Hey, you stay where I tell you to go. I will feed you when I feed you, when I feel like feeding you. I will put grain in the bins. I'll put water over here. But don't worry, it's just a matter of time before I harvest you for my use. Right? And trust me, these guys here, they fear the fence. They fear the force. And therefore, they're pretty damn well behaved. That's what they want for us. Get inside the fence, do what we tell you to do. Don't worry, we have your best interest at heart. And I'm sure some people will be making biblical arguments about the Good Shepherd right now. Believe me, we take this into a homesteading aspect. These animals have the best life they could possibly have. They have fresh air, they have fresh grass, they have grain, they have water, but occasionally we eat them. That's why they exist. They're not here for entertainment or joy. They're not my snuggle buddies. We eat them. Right? We harvest them. So they have a purpose. So look at the analogy here for us. They, the big they, have a purpose for us. They don't like it when the sheep get outside the fence and start acting independently and don't eat their grain and don't drink their water and aren't ready to be harvested. They're not fans of that, right? They want us inside the fence. In other political news, Biden has warned that leading oil companies could be hit with restrictions and a windfall tax if they do not invest a portion of their profits to lower costs for consumers. Fascism, anybody? He, Biden, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., President of the United States of America, asterisk, he stated that profits, like the tripled year-over-year gains by Chevron and ExxonMobil, were a, quote, windfall from the brutal conflict that is ravaging Ukraine and hurting tens of thousands of people around the globe. It's time for these companies to stop war profiteering, meet their responsibilities in this country, and give the American people a break, and still do very well, end quote. Let's not forget that these major energy companies are also the primary owners of all of this renewable, dirty, green energy that the Democrats and Biden are pushing hardcore for the United States to develop. They own that. Yeah, they're not oil companies anymore, they're energy companies, and they have been since the Obama administration at a minimum. That's when I became aware of it, because I was in the field putting up those giant fan things and running thousands of miles of high-tension power line to move the power from the fan things back to your house. And so I got to see it from the inside, and it is horseshit. I've said it before, but I'll say it again. There's nothing clean about renewable clean energy. To say nothing of the fact, all these solar panels, right? I've been listening to PDB, Brian Dean Wright, I believe is his name, the Presidential Daily Brief. It's a podcast, good podcast. You should check it out. He's been talking a lot about dirty green energy. How about the fact that China produces 80% of the world's solar panels? And they produce those solar panels with slave labor from the Uyghurs, which is how they're able to corner the market, because not only do they have the raw components, the minerals that's required to produce the solar cells, but they also have free labor because they've enslaved these people, and incredibly cheap power to produce the panels coming from coal over there in China. Interesting. Nothing clean about it. But it's interesting to me that the Biden administration wants to play this game, perform this dance with the oil companies that are actually energy companies and that own the infrastructure that is renewable energy in the United States of America and elsewhere in the world as well. And this forced transition away from air quote fossil fuels, which I'm not entirely sure I buy that either. There's lots of studies that have shown that oil is a replenishable, renewable resource underground. Yeah, go read those, right? He wants to demonize the oil companies, which are actually energy companies, to force them away from the production of oil towards the production of renewable, clean, green energy, which is not renewable, it's not clean, and is heavily dependent, the production process is heavily dependent upon electricity and diesel fuel. Yeah. As an industry insider, it makes zero sense. But back to the brief. These threats may be toothless political pandering ahead of the midterms, but even if they're not, because Congress will not return until late November, the American people won't see any practical movement on anything like this for a while yet, aka lowering your cost at the pump. If a windfall tax did come to pass, however, industry groups believe that this move would backfire and drive costs up even more for consumers. It's a basic rule of capitalism. I'm a laissez-faire capitalist. Leave me the hell alone. Let me make my own mistakes. Don't bail me out. I'm going to be over here doing the best that I can to solve problems for people, which will in turn generate revenue, which in turn I can use to feed my family and bless people. That's me. That's my worldview. But it's generally accepted by all the good economists that the more government interferes with something, the more bloated and expensive it becomes. Yeah, that's what we need. It's more government involvement in our fuel costs and our energy costs. No thanks. Now that's the brief for today, although there is an article I do want to touch on. If you're on Patreon, you have the written brief and the links. If you're not on Patreon, you don't. So please consider supporting the show on Patreon. We would greatly appreciate that. There's a link in the description of every video and live stream. Now, from the Atlantic... Yes, I know, the Atlantic. Take everything with a grain of salt. Let's declare a pandemic amnesty by Emily Oster. We need to forgive one another for what we did and said when we were in the dark about COVID. First of all, ma'am, not all of us were in the dark about COVID. Some of us went to work every day. Some of us busted our asses to make sure that we didn't lose our American small businesses every day. Some of us made sure that we could take care of the families who depended upon the revenue that our businesses generated every day. Some of us saw this coming from a mile away. Some of us have been on camera talking about this since February of 2019. So we were not all in the dark about COVID, ma'am, and I reject your assumption outright. Now let's continue. She does some dumb build-up in the article here. In April 2020, with nothing else to do, my family took an enormous number of hikes. We all wore cloth masks that I had made myself. We had a family hand signal, which the person in front would use if someone was approaching on the trail and we needed to put on our masks. Once, when another child got too close to my then 4-year-old son on a bridge, he yelled at her, "Social distancing." Oh, so we're indoctrinating children as well. Right? Again, these are the same people that took your children out of school for 2 years, who said you couldn't go to work, who said you couldn't worship, who limited your freedom of movement, who mandated that you must participate in some experimental medical procedure or lose your job, aka die. These are the same people globally who were putting people in detainment camps. And we're just supposed to forgive you? I don't think so. Not for me. Not for me. This is why I want small government and as much freedom as possible at the micro level for me. You don't get to tell me what to do. And I don't get to tell you what to do either. And that's just the way that it is. Because governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. And governments are composed of people. And those people are no better than you or I. They work for us, not the other way around. They are no smarter, no better qualified. They have no better morals and ethics than you or I do. In fact, if we were to look at the data, I think it would be safe to say that generally speaking, across the vast strata of politicians, most of them are morons and scumbags. And I have to curtail my life to the whims of a moron and a scumbag? Now, see, that flies in the face of personal responsibility. And the idea that we're going to have some COVID amnesty, that I'm going to conveniently misremember all of the infractions upon my well-being and my freedom over the last 3 years, you're out of your damn mind. She goes on in this article. You can find it on The Atlantic. It's the COVID, just look for COVID amnesty on your favorite search engine. You'll find it. No. No. As Andy Frisella is fond of saying, these are crimes against humanity, and I agree. And I think every single person that was involved in perpetuating these crimes against humanity should be brought to justice. Every single one of them. How many of you lost your jobs? How many of you lost family members over this? How many of you were unallowed to go worship as you saw fit? And how many of us over here on this side of the camera were saying, F them, you do what you need to do. You go to work. You go to church. They can't tell you that you're not allowed to do that. How many times have I said, exercise your no muscle? No, because what you tolerate, they will embrace. There's no COVID amnesty for me. I'll never forget. And just because it didn't quite work out the way that they wanted it to, you know, the Great Reset isn't exactly going as according to plan. The sheeple didn't just line up and walk into the slaughterhouse the way they wanted to. Now we're supposed to forget? How many people, how many millions of people are going to die in the coming years due to experimental medical processes from companies whose own internal documents show that there was zero difference between those who participated in these experimental medical processes and those that didn't? Zero difference. How many times did we hear that this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated? And I'm supposed to just forget every day of my life for years, struggling to run my businesses, to teach my kids who weren't allowed to go to school anymore, to worship as I see fit, to hear millions upon millions of my fellow Americans who would detract from my reputation because I chose to live freely rather than bend the knee to some tyrant somewhere thousands of miles away. Nope. I'll never forget. Let us not become like the Jews who love to scream, never forget, in reference to the Holocaust, and then support all these politicians who are all about tyranny and removing our gun rights and monopolizing power over the people. Never forget, but let's do all these things that run counter to our well-being. Negative. Or 9/11. Never forget, the country was never more united than it was on 9/12. And now here we are. People's families are broken because of whether or not they bought into this bullshit hype relating to the global pandemic. We've forgotten. I'm not going to conveniently forget this one either. That's the brief for today. If you're one of those people that jumps off when it's time to talk about how to support the show, have a blessed day. Beat feet. Shalom. Get out of here. Skedaddle. For the rest of y'all, I appreciate you. This is hard to get and in limited supply. And it's not going to get any easier to get now that we're very clearly having a ramp up to the war in Ukraine. If you guys remember back, half a year or so ago, we couldn't get first aid kit stuff because the Defense Logistics Agency, DLA, was buying up everything left and right. I'm here to tell you that that is happening again. Insider information, that is happening again. So we at Refuge are scrambling, yet again, to make sure that we can continue to make you kits like this. This is the SOB, which is in stock. And by in stock, I mean it will ship fast. It'll ship today. SOB, small to back kit. It's that big. Weighs as much as one loaded AR magazine. It's got a tourniquet on the bottom, Cat Gen 7 tourniquet here. Committee on TCCC recommended windlass tourniquet. The outside is made of ballistic nylon. This one is mine. As you can see, I use my stuff. It's dirty, it's wet, and it still works. The outside gives you your portability and your durability. The inside gives you your capability. Red handle, pull the inner out of the outer. So you've got your tourniquet on the outside where you can get to it with either hand to remove the tourniquet, because you need that first and foremost. Then you've got your pouch on the inside. On the inside here, we've got a Sharpie. We've got a 4-inch North American Rescue compression bandage, like so. We've got a pair of gloves, North American Rescue gloves. We've got combat gauze for wound packing, compressed gauze for wound packing and circulation issues, minor lacerations. We've got compact 2- compact chest seals in here. We've got BZK wipes right here for disinfecting. And we've got fold flat duct tape because it sticks to everything, including blood, sweat, and tears. That's the SOB kit, the small of the back kit. So it works great on a war belt, a plate carrier, a chest rig, a rucksack. It also works great inside of your skid steer. It also works great on the headrest of your minivan, or in your submarine, or your Black Hawk, or whatever it is that you do, where because you're a human being, you have a pulse and you're currently respirating, aka if you're alive and you'd like to stay that way, you need a purpose-built trauma first aid kit, and that's what we do at Refuge Medical. We've solved the problem of what you need and where you can get it from an American company with pristine morals and ethics. At Refuge, that's what we do. And so if you're looking for a kit, if you're in the market for the kit, such as this, the SOB, you can use promo code BEARNATION for free shipping, and we'll get it out to you quick. In fact, I know many of y'all say in the comments on the regular, hey man, I ordered my kit on Monday, it shipped on Tuesday, I got it Thursday, thank you. You're welcome, man. We live to serve. We're here to help you solve these problems, man. That's what we do. SOB kit from Refuge Medical. Promo code BEARNATION. Refuge training, if you need to learn the fine art of how to not die. We've recently added, by an immense amount of popular demand, we've added more classes in Dallas and Waco, Texas, and we will be adding more national tour dates in the coming weeks. But if you're anywhere near Dallas or Waco, Texas, we've added more dates because many of y'all have reached out and said, hey, those classes sold out. And you're like, hey, I really wanted to come. So I would recommend you come. Additionally, these will be the last classes that we'll post at 2022 pricing. So if you're interested, you want to learn the fine art of how to not die, aka how to deal with a massive hemorrhage, including tourniquets and wound packing, airway management, chin lift, jaw thrust, nasopharyngeal airway, respiratory management, pneumothorax, tension pneumothorax, open and closed, etc., circulation, head injury, hypothermia, diagnosis and treatment, and everything else, as well as how to elevate to a higher level of care. This is all in the level 1 4-hour classroom class, by the way. Responder 1. Yeah, all of that. That's Responder 1. Or Responder 2, CPR and AED in a tactical setting, and an introduction to scenario-based medical training for civilians, including working a car wreck, like rendering aid with your kit at a car wreck. Or Responder 3, a 10-hour day of brutality where you will do tactical medicine as a civilian all day, including responding to active shooter threats, force-on-force, one-on-one scenario-based, team-building scenario-based training, where you will shoot instructors with blue guns and they will shoot you. All that's available at refugetraining.com. It is the best civilian tactical medicine course on the face of the earth. I've now had five steely-eyed Green Berets tell me this. 5 of them. They know what they're talking about. It's their job. They go around the world training people. I don't know if you know what FIT is, Foreign Internal Defense, but it's a large portion of what Army SOF does. They train people. And so to have people who train people tell you that this is the best civilian training they've ever seen, I appreciate that. Lastly, GrindstoneMinistries.com. We are currently not only building Caleb House, which is our restoration facility for juvenile human trafficking supporters. Not only building Caleb House, we are taking care of the more than 24 people that we currently have in our care that we've rescued from being serially raped every day. But we are also engaged in ongoing operations to jam up more pedophiles who are currently destroying the future of children, and remediating a house that was flooded during Hurricane Ian in North Fort Myers, Florida, for a Gold Star mother. A mother who lost her son in Iraq, and her daughter, who's also an Army veteran, who is medically disabled, living in her house. If you'd like to pour into that, please visit grindstoneministries.com. We can't do this without you, and I'm blessed that you are on the team. Honestly, we have the best audience on the face of the planet, and because of you, we get to go and do good works like that. So thank you for pouring into us. If you would like to join the fight, you can visit grindstoneministries.com. I appreciate y'all. I pray you have an awesome day. Shalom.